Some other news for you now. Today, President Biden will deliver remarks on the federal government's response to Hurricane Idalia. His administration had approved an emergency declaration before the storm made landfall this morning. So for more on this, let's go to CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang. So, Weijia, what can you tell us? What can we expect to hear from the president in regards to the government's response?
So the president is actually expected to spend the bulk of this speech talking about the Maui rebuilding and the commitment that the federal government has given to rebuild after the wildfires there. In fact, just today announcing $95 million to help rebuild the electrical grid there. But of course, he is also going to talk about what the administration is doing to work with state and local governments to respond to Idalia. And we imagine that he will reiterate the commitment to provide whatever Florida needs, which he already said that the administration is in constant contact with state officials there, that he has spoken to Governor Ron DeSantis, and they are prepared to continue sending resources, whatever that may be, including members of FEMA to shore up support, especially now that the recovery is really going to be a big issue. And so he will hit home those points and just stress that, the White House is ready to go.
It's kind of striking to think that he's talking about Maui wildfires that we just had just a couple weeks ago. Now we're dealing with the Category 4 storm hasn't hit Florida, in I think I heard more than 5 decades.
Yeah.
This is one of the strongest storms. Has there been discussion about climate change and maybe tackling these issues? The president took some heat for not going to Maui right away and not handling that situation. Now that this has come up just a couple weeks later, is there any discussion about handling this a little bit differently?
Jamie, this has been an ongoing conversation, and now the administration is pointing to these back-to-back disasters as sort of validation for the fact that, they are really trying to ramp up the climate agenda for the United States, which included having to instill several different policies that the Trump administration had rolled back. And we know that, President Biden has really made a commitment to offering money, because that's what you really need here when you're talking about resources to build the next chapter, to sort of handle the climate crisis. And so, yes, we are hearing from senior administration officials that things are only going to get worse, that we're only going to be seeing more of these types of disasters as a result of climate change. And so they've been sounding the alarm bells. They believe that, unfortunately, this is just another chapter in what's to come for the world.
Well, as you know, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is actually running to become president as well. But in times like this, some of that stuff usually goes right out the window because they really need to work together. Can you talk to us about, the conversations that these two men, President Biden and Ron DeSantis, have been having about working together to make sure that residents can stay safe and rebuild?
So we know that they've had at least one phone call, a direct phone call, to talk about, everything that Florida is asking for. And the president approved the emergency declaration response, because what that means is that, after the president signs off on that, it gives another $5 million of funding for any state that makes the request, and it's approved to deal with emergency services to make sure they have what they need to respond. But you're absolutely right. This is a little awkward. They are political rivals, but they were political rivals before DeSantis officially announced that he was running for president. It was always sort of understood that this is the path that he was going to take. It was understood that he would bash President Biden and his policies at any chance he got, because he was doing that well before he jumped into the GOP race. And they've had to work together before. I mean, you might remember that huge condominium collapse in Florida in 2021. They had to work together then. Last year, the president actually went down there to tour the remnants of Hurricane Ian. So they have this working relationship, and they have to put aside all of the insults and the criticisms that will surely be there in the background, no matter what.
I just think about, you saying the millions of dollars now having to be spent on these types of things and being proactive versus reactionary in many of these situations. You think of FEMA. Florida gets hurricanes. The hurricane season, doesn't end until December 1st. Wildfire season hasn't even started in California. Won't start until probably late September through November. We've seen the wildfires in Hawaii. What in terms of FEMA,
Florida residents are probably still depending on FEMA from the last hurricane.
From Ian.
Yeah.
You think of the Fort Myers area. When you look at FEMA and its funding, is it there?
So this is a really important question because you're right. They are burning through the disaster relief fund. And we heard from the FEMA administrator who said there is $3.4 billion left in the fund to get us through the fiscal year, which ends in September. And so she is saying that they need more money. They've already put in a request for an additional $12 billion for supplemental aid, but Congress has to come back and approve that first, right? And so there might be a gap, and there is concern because the money is running out, and because we are seeing so many of these disasters where, you seem to just run. We're talking about price tags that, are massive, millions and millions of dollars. And so she even said that they might add an additional request on top of the extra $12 billion that has yet to be formally approved in anticipation of, needing these funds to help people get through these emergencies.
And just sort of a reminder, FEMA is responsible for the flood insurance, the federally available flood insurance that people can buy, because if chances are you can't afford flood insurance, and you probably have to go to if it's available.
And there's so many insurance companies now pulling out of states like Florida and California. So, Weijia, obviously, we'll continue talking about this, I'm sure, over the coming days and weeks. Thanks so much.
Thank you.